Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Hi, everybody. Simone Fellini here from POAC, getting ready to start questions for the BCBA. Just going to give a second or two for some people to join us. And today, what we're going to be talking about is research on something called the SCARF model. And what it is it's about how the brain perceives threats and rewards. And it's really important research, and it has great application for working with people with autism and relating to people with autism. And what we're going to talk about is how we can use this research to modify social behavior to better work with and reach people with autism. And hopefully, as parents and educators, once you have this information, you'll be able to advocate. You'll be able to not only use it to better relate with your children and students, but also to advocate for how others relate to your students and teachers, or your students and children with autism, particularly in the medical community, I would say. And so we have with us today, as always, Dr. Bobby Gallagher, who's a BCBAD, and has also done some research surrounding this. And we'll talk about this. And as always, we want your participation. So please use the comment section to ask a question, to raise an issue if you're having one. And let us talk about that. We're going to present for a bit, and then if it gets to a point where we have some participation and we want to do a little bit more back and forth, we can do that. And we will not be here tomorrow doing questions for the BCBA, but we will be back on Thursday and Friday. Okay? So let me go ahead and introduce Bobby Gallagher, and she'll take the presentation from here. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Simone, so much. So one of the reasons we decided to do this is when we've been doing these sessions, we've really been hearing from parents of how their child just isn't doing well with them being the teacher. And we've talked about this, that it's an unusual situation for the individual to suddenly have their parent be a teacher who wasn't a teacher in the past. And yesterday we gave some suggestions on, how you might be able to set up the environment for that. But today you just want to kind of focus on why the child may be responding this way. And maybe this is just unusual to some parents because we look at autism and we understand that there are differences and challenges with social interaction, but we may not exactly understand what those differences or challenges are. And so SCARF was a model not originally developed, and were not developed for individuals on the spectrum, but just developed for all individuals, and really comes down to just understanding how the brain works. So all of us, your brain responds to rewards and threats constantly, all day long, every single day. That this is how we are set up for survival. So we respond to rewards by moving closer towards them or wanting them more, and we respond to threats by moving away from them. And so every single minute of every single day, you are making or responding to these. Some of them just aren't big threats or big rewards, they're mini ones. And so you're not really maybe thinking of them as that. But if I could just give you even just a little bit of an idea, just going into a movie theater and sitting down in a movie theater, obviously not now, right? We're all social distancing. But if you had to go to a movie theater and you sat in the movie theater and it was empty, and somebody comes in and sat right next to you, and the whole rest of the movie theater was empty, that would immediately send up a bit of a threat response to you. And there's no, you don't know that there's a threat. There's no actual perceived threat at the moment. The person just maybe came into the movie theater and likes that position, but you automatically kind of get there. Why did they not pick one of the other 120 seats? And so that is a basic survival skill. And so threats come into all of us 7 times more than rewards do, or we receive them at this heightened level. And so individuals on the autism spectrum, the challenge that they have is not only do they have these threats coming in at 7 times more than they do rewards, they often perceive things that are not threats to be threats. And so when I say perceive them, their brain actually responds to things differently than ours may to certain to certain things. So that change in routine. So somebody might say that a change in routine for all of us can probably throw us a little bit, right? So if you suddenly moved a piece of furniture that you'd had in the same place all the time, or if you moved your coffee pot in the morning, how many days would it take you before you don't go to the old spot anymore? Right? You keep going to that same old spot and you go, oh my gosh, I moved it days ago. Why do I keep doing this? And there's just sort of, but you just perceive that as sort of a nuisance, or maybe a nuance in what's kind of going on. The individual with autism may actually perceive something like that change as a threat, and they become overwhelmed by it. They don't understand it. Why did you move it? They want it moved back. It really becomes a threat in their whole environment. And so now suddenly everything is off. And so things that you do think are just, shouldn't really be perceived that way can be. And of course, now doing things a very different way, if mom or dad or someone else is suddenly teaching me, or even if my teacher is all of a sudden coming through on my computer, and I've never seen my teacher come through my computer before, these can all be perceived as a threat. And when I say a threat, now just imagine how you feel if that person sat next to you at the movie theater. Your heart rate would probably go up. You would be really confused about what's happening. You may or may not know how to respond to them, whether you would get up and walk away, whether you would wait this out and see, kind of all depends on you, the way that you typically respond to threats, or whether you would be very aggressive in clearly stating you need to move. I don't know why you sat here. But now imagine that you don't have that vocal or verbal ability if you're on the autism spectrum. So what if somebody sat next to you, but they didn't, speak the same language as you? How would you say to them, I really think you need to move, right? And if they can't, then maybe you would move, but now this would be the equivalent of escape, right? I'm going to escape the situation. So when somebody says, well, my child tries to avoid or escape tasks, right? It's that same thing. So I'm perceiving a threat. I'm going to move myself away from it. And that's kind of what's happening for a lot of our children right now as they're going through this very big change in their environment, in their setting, in the way that things are being delivered to them, in their change in routine, in their teachers that are, kind of coming through to them in a different way. All of these things can be perceived as a threat. And so the work of David Rock comes from the field of neuroscience. And these are just some of the things to go over, just a real brief to kind of help people to understand what we mean by SCARF. Right? These are the 5 areas of the brain that are responding to threats and rewards all day long. And so status is that relative importance to other, but not just status as in money status or anything like that, but even just physical status of being next to another person. And then certainty are those concerns. We're all concerned about the future, and who's not concerned about it right now, right? In the midst of a pandemic, real big words that we're kind of throwing out there. In the midst of a pandemic, who's not concerned about the future? And so the more that we can predict the future, the better that we all feel. So, and to put that into perspective, now we're all looking at, what day will we be able to get back to normal? Right. And the more we have a concrete day, if somebody says to us, it's April 30th, that makes us feel better than if somebody just kind of arbitrarily says, well, we're looking at, some time out from now, we're looking at, maybe it'll be. If somebody said to you, absolutely, positively, April 30th, you can get out. Well, none of us can say that to you.
That's a really good point. And I think it's almost a window probably into what our kids go through. A lot. I'm feeling that stress of, and I was saying this just the other day, it's not that you can't deal with the challenges, it's when is the back end? When what's the end date? And
right.
I imagine that that's what a lot of people with autism must feel like all the time. What's the uncertainty, the not knowing, am I doing the right thing? So it's interesting. I just came up with that now as you're saying it.
Yeah, we're all feeling it, right? We're all feeling, and maybe now, exactly. This level of uncertainty, and still something, maybe even a level of uncertainty that you can't identify. right, in your body, right? Like you're not really understanding why maybe you're feeling a certain way, or why you have that pit in your stomach, or that anxiety or that angst up in your chest, and you're not understanding why you have it. But you do know that this level of uncertainty about the pandemic and not knowing when things are going to get back to normal is certainly frustrating to us. Imagine how that is to someone else, right? And to do it. And so then that certainty comes in with concerns and being able to predict the absolute future. You know, I want to be able to predict the future. And I think all of us would want to be able to do that, but within minutes of a task, and within, you know, time frame of months. Both are important to know what's going to happen to me within the next 10 minutes and what's going to happen to me in the next 10 years are both very important, right? And then the autonomy provides a sense of control, what they're saying, over events, or a sense of my own body. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we look at how to apply this a little bit. But autonomy is really important for all of us to know that we have control over ourselves. And how many of us are lost right now feeling like we don't? And how many people are maybe pushing that envelope of autonomy when we look at maybe stepping outside or going where they shouldn't be going? Like and that's almost pushing the envelope of autonomy. Like I have control of myself. I'm going to go out and visit other people, whether the world has been telling me not to or not. That's kind of fighting against this this pressure to have to stay inside, right? So some people fight for autonomy more than others. So when we look at all of these areas of SCARF, some people have a bigger reaction to different threats of different areas. And so a lot of people's autonomy is being threatened right now. And some people are overreacting to that while other people aren't. And of course, anybody that's on Facebook can see everybody yelling at everybody to stay at home. You know, but it's just kind of like, and for some of us, that's an okay thing. We're fine with that. For others, they're really struggling with it. And then relatedness is in this sense of safety with others, or are you my friend or are you my foe? And again, I'll talk about that in relation to working with your child at home. But this is a constant thing for all of us. We really need to know whether the people around us are people that we can trust. And we've been talking about trust this week for a lot of our children, just in the process of you are now working with me as a parent and being my teacher. And I don't trust you because I've already set you up for what your role is in my life, and you've broken that rule, or you've broken that role. So now I'm not so sure that I trust you, and I'm losing trust in you because I knew who you were before all of this. I don't know who you are now. And when I say don't know who you are, I'm just saying the role has really been changed for me. And then in fairness in perception is a perception of fair exchanges between people. And again, we'll relate this to kind of that home portion in a second. But fairness is really, you know, kind of doing what you said you're going to do and sort of sticking to it.
We do have a question there,
okay.
Which is, can this relate to insecurities?
Insecurities in relation to a child. I'm trying to think of how. I'd like a little more information on that question, but I'm going to say that it absolutely will relate to it. If we already have insecurities about our abilities to do something, we're only going to magnify it during this time that we have right here. But all of these can be dealt with as far as insecurities. I'm trying to, if you can, give me an idea of how these insecurities manifest themselves with the child that you're talking about. But if I'm already insecure about my ability to complete tasks, and now I'm being asked to do these in different settings, different environments, different areas, all of these areas of SCARF are threatened, all of them. So that would be a huge problem for somebody if I already came into the situation not quite sure. And so interacts with the world. Okay, so if I'm already socially sort of insecure about how I'm interacting with everybody, now to some extent this can go both ways, right? So we've been talking a little bit. My son Austin actually, you know, for lack of maybe a better way of saying this, I think he's been prepping for this his whole life, to not go out into the world, and that having to stay home, he's probably less anxious and feeling better and doing better. And then when we have when we have to go back out, all of these things come back out. So he's threatened because he is, maybe the word insecure, but he is unsure of his position in the world outside of his own home. And so all of these areas would be there. But so for some of us, our children are threatened by these changes inside their world of where they are now and having to stay home. So in both ways it can absolutely relate to that.
Sure.
I hope I answered that.
Yep.
Okay. So in order to decrease stress or decrease the way that your children may be responding right now, we have to be decreasing the threats in their life. And so, and again, I want threats to really just be thought of as how I'm perceiving the way things should be and how they are being presented right now. That in of itself is a threat. I don't mean that any of you are just actually, threatening your child to do something. But when we want to decrease a threat, we want to really just look at it of when you go to present anything to your child, and as opposed to standing next to them at the dining room table and hovering over the back of their shoulder, to get and sit next to them. And the reason that is that this is the time when they will be most receptive to what it is that you're presenting to them. So if you stand above them, automatically their threats are higher. Automatically, it doesn't matter. That's just how we as humans perceive when other individuals stand next to us or above us or hover over us, that we've been put into a position of being more submissive immediately. And so as soon as you come down onto their level, that threat goes away. And it doesn't matter that you're mom or dad or teacher or whoever it is. And then the next one would be this level of certainty. Can you provide a detailed schedule or pictures to show exactly what's about to happen throughout my day, and or even within my task? Or can you tell me that at absolutely 12:17 we're going to be done with something? Can you give me some certainty of when things are going to be over? And especially in this incredibly uncertain world that the child is going through, can you at least provide me some certainty? And if your child isn't done with the work at 12:17, is it okay to let them get up from it for a bit because you promised it, right? You promised at whatever time it was that it was going to be over. And so let them, and then kind of come back to it. And we talk about this autonomy in this way. What I want you to look at is, can my child say no? Are they allowed to say no to the situation? Or are they allowed to make a choice? And so all day long, every single day, we make choices. And some of our individuals are able to make more choices than others. Many people make choices for them, but right down to, who you sit next to, who you talk to, who you interact with, who you respond to in a text, everything, you've made a choice. Just picking up your phone to look at who texts you, you made a choice. And so can our children have choices in the work that we're presenting to them? And do they, can they then be honored? So can the choices be honored? And so minimally, can you offer them, which topic do you want to work on right now? And which thing do you want to present on? Or how many math questions are you kind of willing to do with me? Like, just kind of give them that sense of autonomy where they may have a little bit more control. And again, in this incredibly strange world where we're losing, control of everything. So in that relatedness part, I think one of the things as parents, we have to let them know this is really hard. This is a hard thing to get through. We're all having a really rough time. You're there to support them as best as you can. We've laughed a little bit over the days as we've been presenting, in that, some of our families are not so sure about the work, right? Because they themselves, it's like, I don't think I could win Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader right now? And I know many people who are probably very intelligent got kicked off in second and third grade questions. So it's okay to let somebody know that you have to, that you are also maybe struggling with all of this, if that's possible for your child to understand. If it's not possible for them to understand, there's just a level of relatedness in that. Can you spend some downtime with them, spend some time doing some things maybe that, really you guys can do together, cooking something, doing something, and really kind of becoming a support system for them. And then in the fairness part, like I had, kind of leads back to that certainty thing that we had said. Do not do more than you originally said you were going to do. Don't add to it. Don't make it harder. Don't push. We've been talking to families, like set up a schedule of working with somebody. And when it's over, when the time is up, actually end it, or even end it early, or end it on the last best note. But don't do it. Don't keep pushing to add one more, add on the demand. And I think the challenge really comes for us as parents is we often know that our children are capable of maybe more than they're letting on. It's hard to be the teacher of your own child. It really is. But at the same time, as we're going through this, I would recommend highly to just ending on a good note.
And there are some very straightforward things here, and the way this boils down. So the whole idea of sitting next to at eye level, of approaching even at eye level rather than standing up over, that's something anybody can do. Anybody can do.
Right.
And the giving choices is something anybody can do.
Yes. So to answer the question of somebody in the chat saying, like, even for your for parents or somebody who's now had a decreased capacity in some way, if we can look at that, is it now the threats, are they more because they're there, or because they're helping them, are the threats less? And it's going to depend on the person. So that's part of the challenge that we have. So autonomy may not be really important to everybody. All of us have all of these different components, some of which may be really more important to someone. So if you had somebody who was very independent in the past, and went about their days and just didn't kind of have to check in with anyone, and they were this unbelievably autonomous person that travels and does and whatever, autonomy is probably going to be really important to them in a time like this, or in a time like you're talking about, where now all of a sudden maybe some of the things that they used to do on their own they can't, where someone else may not have that, and kind of maybe I'll even compare, maybe say to some of the individuals that we work with, would be more than willing to let somebody bring them everything and put my socks on for me, and and do whatever you want for me, lay back and let it all kind of happen. So these threats are also individualized to every single person, and that may be one of the challenges for so many of us. We have to start looking at which threats and rewards are important to someone. So status isn't all that important to some people, but certainly very important to others. And that's why you're always looking at which ones are present, at the time. So the main idea of SCARF really works on this, right? So the brain treats many social threats and rewards with the exact same intensity as physical threats and rewards. So emotionally, if you are hurting, there are parts in the brain that are responding just as if somebody just hit you.
Right.
And that's really a hard thing to think about, right? And what happens if somebody's hitting you? You want to get away from it.
Mm-hmm.
So your brain is responding the same way. Get away from the threat, even though the threat may be emotional in some other way. And our children are very emotional in this time because, again, you're presenting yourself very differently than you have in the past if mom or dad are now teacher or therapist, right? And the other thing is as long as the brain is in this heightened state that we're talking about, the capacity to make decisions or to solve problems, right, and is decreased when it's under threat. So I want some of our families, because we have been talking about whether or not some of our children are able to do the work, that was sent home for them. We've been having that discussion for the last week or so, in that some families are saying my child can't do what the teacher sent home or the therapist sent home, or my child, I thought they would be better at this, or they're not generalizing it. And I've used that terminology myself as part of this to say that our children aren't generalizing information, and we need to, but it can also be that their brain is under such threat response right now that they can't do it because of the threat. So we have to decrease the threat response and decrease all these areas that SCARF addresses before we make that decision that the child's incapable of doing the work, or that obviously isn't doing work that school said they could do, right? And then again, increase those reward responses in hopes that they will be able to look at their work better and make decisions and collaborate with you in doing this. And then the threat response is more intense and more common, and often needs to be carefully minimized in social interactions. And that's what we get back to, in that threat responses come in 7 times higher than reward responses. And again, for individuals on the autism spectrum, they may be threatened by something that you shouldn't think they should be threatened by. And and it's just a change in the routine could be that thing that did it for them. Right. So, and when I say social interactions, these are all the types, these aren't all, these are just a few of the types of social interactions. But a parent-child is a social interaction, right? A teacher-student, a peer-to-peer, and that doctor-patient model. All of these are social interactions that we're having. It's a social interaction to see your teacher on the computer, even though the person's not next to you, right? Those are, anything that involves somebody other than yourself is a social interaction that you're having with someone. So all of these interactions have the possibility of causing threats or rewards, right? All of them have it. And so it's really about trying to figure out which one of the rewards things that we can increase using that SCARF model. Can we, or decrease the threats and increase the reward systems that are happening at that time? Because one thing we also know is that as long as our brain is in that threat, the executive functioning part of our brain, which we hear a lot about for individuals on the autism spectrum, it's not working the way that it should. And if executive functioning isn't working, then coping skills aren't working, calming skills aren't working. All of these parts of the brain are on fire because it's in that threat stage. And although it may not be on a flight mode, you may not see somebody running away, or maybe you will, it's still heightened. And so I just want you to imagine that person that sits next to you at the movie theater, and that immediate sensation that comes over your body of like, what are they doing? Right. And that feeling being inside of your child, and how can you decrease that feeling? And I know that we all think they should just be decreased by it because I'm mom, but right now you're teacher. You're not mom, right? So, or dad, or whatever it is. And I know I keep saying mom, but that's because I'm a mom, right? But like all of a sudden you're not that, you're not. So you are the stranger sitting next to me in the movie theater, and you are evoking that same weird sensation that comes up. And what do I want to do? Some people will want to be aggressive during that situation. Some people will want to run, but what I really am trying to do is to escape this internal state of this level of anxiety that I can't figure out what's going on. And that's what many of our children are doing right now. They're trying to escape an internal state of anxiety to get through all of this. Right. So I hope I hope that rings true. I hope that wasn't too technical in what we're talking about. And I hope that our families and our therapists and our teachers, all, even as they're doing telehealth, can see why we may have to do it, or maybe why a child might not be excited to see their teacher on the screen, right? Well, they might see them on the screen and run completely in another direction, because that's a threat of like, my world is not the same as it used to be. So I hope that our families can see that even though you're obviously a loving, caring person who just wants your child to kind of succeed through all this, they can still be perceiving their environment as a threat and what's happening to them.
And you said that's more likely than not. That threats are more likely than not. So
yes, because we are wired for survival, and I think that sometimes we forget about that. And some of our children who may have, it's exactly that primal instincts that somebody was talking about. But somebody who may have language, we have we sometimes, unfortunately, talk about our children with autism who are more verbal as understanding more. And I shouldn't say unfortunately, that's the wrong word, but as that because verbal equals understanding more. But I can only understand what I've lived through before. And if I've not lived through my parent being my teacher, if I have not lived through all these things, it's coming through as a brand new experience. And for some of us, brand new experiences are amazing. You know, anybody that wants to go jump off of a cliff with a skydiving, whatever, you know, good for you. But for others of us, brand new experiences are petrifying. And even though that experience, when it's over, could be exhilarating, could be something you want to do again, that initial time when you're setting yourself up for it, there's a lot of anxiety around it, right? I remember the first time I went parasailing, I absolutely had myself all worked up into a frenzy. And I love it now, but getting there, I was like, why am I doing this? What am I doing? Why am I going? You know, so all of that newness to something can really just set off systems to be like, warning, warning. You know, I've got like warning Will Robinson running through my head right now. But that's what it is. As soon as my situation has changed, I'm under this warning mode. And our children are fighting the warning mode as all of us would, and maybe without the understanding or the language to know. And I have to say, the only reason I got over my parasailing issue was because my daughter was going up with me, my daughter on the autism spectrum, and I needed to support her.
Right.
And by supporting her and saying, hey, look, we're going to look for Ariel. We're going to try and find, you know, she's got to live here somewhere. And we started singing Peter Pan, We Can Fly. My anxiety decreased in my attempt to help her. If I was just going by myself, I never would have gotten on that thing. Right. So my threat systems were saying, don't go, don't go. But I did push myself to get through it. But that's only because I had this person that I needed to help get through it. Right.
Exactly.
So, and our children don't have that right now, you know, so I think that's what it is.
So if we could just, we're just about at the end of our time, but if we could just boil it down to a couple of suggestions. One would be that approaching at eye level and working with somebody at eye level would be one. Another one would be giving choices and honoring those choices, right? Another would be not to do anything that is unexpected or that wasn't really part of the fair deal.
Right.
We're working on A, B, and C today. Let's not shoot for D, even though it just went great. All some concrete things. I don't know if I missed anything.
No, those are all great. Yeah, that's it. You know, just really kind of presenting it that way. The certainty, I think, for our children is probably the most important, because the certainty also leads to the fairness, you know, and I think that one is big. Of course. Oh yeah, of course. I think there's a question there in reference to attention being involved. Absolutely. And as I said, for every single one of our students, it's going to be something different. Somebody can see you up on a screen and be so excited that you came into their world, right? And somebody else can come and maybe even relate that to children who watch, you know, Mickey Mouse Club all day long, but then they go to Disney and see the real thing and they're petrified, right? It's kind of like all of a sudden Mickey Mouse is 6 feet tall and he's, you know, wait a minute, he was this big on my screen. So, but other children will go running to him. So that's when I say that we have to look at rewards and threats to every single person so differently of what they perceive as being a reward or a threat, but lean towards the side of threat, because that will help you to increase the reward system. Always lean towards the side that this is probably a threat.
Exactly. Okay, we're a little bit over on time. That's okay. But we hope that you guys are enjoying these sessions. We're going to be back on Thursday. And in the meantime, if you want to email us at info@poac.net and let us know maybe some topics that you would like to hear or questions that you have. And we love the back and forth today with the questions in the chat. That's always very helpful. So if there's nothing else and there's no other questions, I thought that was great today. And we will see you again on Thursday. Anybody out there that wants to join us today for our first session of yoga, we have it set up as an event. I believe yoga is at 3:15 today. And tomorrow we'll have a music program. And we'll see you back on questions for the BCBA on Thursday. Thanks, Bobby. Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.